Okay, so this time I'm going to talk a little bit more about typography, which is you may be starting to realize is actually a fairly big topic. So we're just going to deal with some of the more uh, simple kind of aspects of it to begin with. So one thing that we want to do as designers is to make sure that our designs have a very good sort of typographic hierarchy, and there are lots of different ways of achieving that hierarchy. We've seen already that a lot of that is in fact built into your code. If we come over to the editor, just having H1, and down here I've got an H2 that gives itself a hierarchy, but it's not apparent on the page here particularly. The headings are a bit bigger and bolder than the paragraph text, that's quite clear, but there isn't a clear distinction visually between H1 and H2. The default sizes for the other headings will get smaller, but it's still not the kind of level of control that we would want, and it is an extremely basic kind of design at this point, defaulting to Times New Roman there on this machine. So let's have a look first just at starting to load in a typeface. Then we'll look at the sizing it, and we will get into the REM unit that I mentioned last time. So one simple way for us, given that we have access to Adobe Fonts, is to actually just look for the Creative Cloud icon in your menu bar. And it's this sort of one that looks a little bit like an infinity sign, and here it is here. I'll just hit Command-Option-H to hide everything else. And if we go under the font section up here, what we want to do is to not just look at the installed fonts. We want to actually use Adobe's online tool, Adobe Fonts Online, what used to be called Typekit. Typekit was an independent product that they purchased quite a long time ago now. It doesn't have the most amazing library, but we have access to it, and it's decent. There are a few gaps in it, things that typefaces that I would really want it to have that it unfortunately does lack. But let's have a look at what we've got. I'm going to just click on that Browse More Fonts button here. That's just this one up here. And it's opening it up in my browser. I'm actually going to pull that tab out just so I can range over it a bit more freely. All right, so we've got various things that we can explore here, different categories of typeface, such as geometric, rounded. We can search between sans serif and serif, slab serifs, if that sort of thing. I'm going to look for a typeface called Futura, designed by the great type designer Paul Renner in the 1920s. So here it is. Here's one version of Futura, the one that's on Adobe Fonts. Okay, so this is here. It actually dates from the 1920s. It still feels pretty nice, pretty fresh. So I'm just going to use that. I'm not going to try to pair it with anything else. I'm just going to use it in various different weights for the time being. Okay. So what we want to do, once you find the typeface that you want to use, perhaps you're just looking for a display face for your headings. Maybe you want to pair that with a different one. We'll look at font pairing at another point in time. But once you've got it, just come down here to this option, Add to Web Project. So I'm just going to click on that. And it brings up this sort of little modal in the dialog here. Let's add fonts to a web project. Now, I've got a whole lot of older existing ones, various clients, some personal projects in there as well. I'm going to choose this option, create a new project, and I recommend you do that too. So that you're not loading in typefaces that you don't need. It does increase your bandwidth and will potentially slow down your site if you're excessive with that as well. All right, so I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to call it, Cert for Portfolio site. That'll do. Okay. And down here, I can actually choose what weights, styles and weights I want. So I want the book, probably the book italic. Coming down here, maybe probably want the heavy, maybe not the heavy italic. Not sure. But we can always add it back in later if I need it. So I'm going to put in extra bold. And I think that will probably do. Do we go for heavy or bold? I'm just going to leave it as heavy. That will do for the minute. All right. As I say, we can come back and modify that later. In fact, I'm going to switch off heavy and replace that with demi. All right. Then just click on create. All right. And one thing you can see here is that it gives us already another link tag, very helpfully with this hypertext reference in here. So you can see it looks exactly like the one, or very like the one that we've written ourselves previously to load our own style sheet. There's a bit of a guideline there for using it in HTML email if you need to. But again, we put this in, as it says here, into the head element on our website. Okay. One other thing that it includes is these details down here. It includes the different weights. And this is in fact CSS that it's giving us here. So we can copy both of those and use those in our CSS file. All right, so I'm just going to, first of all, start off with that link tag. I'm just going to copy that. Come back to Visual Studio Code here. Go to the CSS file. Sorry, to my HTML file. And I'm going to make sure that I put it in a head above where my own personal style sheet is loading. I'm also going to just sort of modify that so its format is consistent with the other one, just putting that rel attribute there and closing that, just again indicating that the link tag is a self-closing tag. So it's a complete element. So we've got the fonts loading here and then our own styles loading here. It's important we put them in that order because we want the fonts to load up here before we start using them in our style sheet down here. It will load in that order because the web browser will read from top to bottom. All right, now we can start to place some of those styles into these things here. So I'm going to come back to Adobe Fonts, and I'm just going to copy some of these details down here. I'm just going to copy them out here. I will just put them in my CSS, but inside, actually I'll copy that heading there as well. Just going to put that inside a comment in here in our CSS. Now, I don't think I've shown you CSS comments yet. They look different from HTML comments. But one common thing is that regardless whether you're working in HTML or CSS, if you hit Command // it gives you a comment in whatever language you're using. Okay, so if you can't remember exactly how to write a comment in CSS or in HTML, don't worry, you can just hit Command /. All right, so my comment is going to start here with that / and an asterisk, and then down here with that asterisk and a /. Together they make up a comment. So again, that's ignored completely by the computer, but I'm just pasting in these details here just so I can have that as a handy reference for putting in my styles. Okay, so what I actually want is to take this section here, because I want to make that my default weight for everything. So I'm going to put that actually on the body element there. So let's copy that, come down here and paste that in, indent these with a Command right square bracket. I could tab them in individually. Command right square bracket is by far the fastest way to do that. Okay, so let's have a look at this and what I've put in here. So this property, font family. Okay, so that's for choosing your font family, if you like, your typeface, as I generally prefer to say, which in this case is Futura-PT. Then there's a comma and a second thing here, sans serif. So what that means is that it's going to, when the web page loads, the web browser is going to try to use Futura first. And if it can't, for some reason, say Adobe Fonts isn't working, whatever, something like that, it will default to whatever the operating system sans serif typeface is. On the Mac, that's probably going to be Helvetica Neue. On Windows, not sure, probably Arial. On Android devices, that might be Roboto, and so on. Okay, so we've already seen from these code snippets that Adobe has given us that the right font weight for the book weight is 400, and the font style is normal. Okay, the book oblique style is the same, except that for this line, font style italic. So where we want to use that, we would just put that line there. All right. So we should now see that when we go back and refresh our web browser, I'll just close this. I'll minimize that window, just get it out of the way. Let's reload this, and fingers crossed this will work. Boom. There we go. All right, and you can see that it's actually gone a little bit above and beyond. It's actually used the extra bold weight for the headings here. And the paragraph text is indeed in Futura. All right, it's already looking a little bit better, a little bit smarter. I think I want my heading, though, to be bigger. And perhaps in all caps as well, but let's make it bigger to begin with. All right, so let's come back to a CSS here. Now, a couple of things I can do. One is just probably the easiest thing, is just to style the H1 element directly, so that wherever we have an H1 element in the site, it's going to have whatever styles I have in here. Okay, so I'm going to explicitly make that extra bold. So I'm just copying and pasting this from stuff here that I have in my handy comment up there. So here we have, again, font family. Font weight, though, is 800, so that means it's that very heavy weight. Font style is normal. All right, let's make it bigger, though. Font size. Let's make it really quite large. Let's make it 4 rem. See how that looks. All right, the rem unit. Let's have a look at that. All right. What that's doing is actually, it's based on the M unit, we could say EMS, EM, meaning basically it's a unit that just these days tends to mean the font size. It used to mean the size of the letter M in the typeface. The M dash is the width of one M as well, typically. All right, so, but the rem unit means root M. That means it's taking the size that actually comes from the HTML element or the body element and that is inherited down, and it's using that as a standard measure. All right, I really like this because it means that you can, if you build out your design using the rem unit, everything is built in terms of your basic type, your basic font size. So here, like we have in the paragraph text here, and that can help to give it a really nice sort of vertical rhythm, right? If you're padding, if your vertical and horizontal spacing is using rem units, then you're off to a flying start as far as getting that sort of typographic foundation to your design. Right? Ultimately, you can build that up into a web equivalent of really Swiss style, which is a very typographic approach to graphic design, to layout in particular. All right, so let's reload that. You can see that heading there, quite a bit bigger. Not bad. All right. So how big then is one rem? How big is that default size? This is 4 of them, and this is presumably one of them down here in this paragraph text. Well, by default, it's 16 pixels, but I like to make that explicit on the body element. So I'm going to say font size 16px. That is the default, but it's a good figure to work with. Your users can still increase their type size with Command plus or Control plus if they're using a Windows machine, that sort of thing, or set their browser preferences. And you can see that when I reload that, it makes no difference at all because the font size is set to 16 pixels. But let's make that base font size 32 pixels, double that. Okay. Now one rem will be 32 pixels. Have a look at this. See, there's that text quite a bit bigger there. All right. Oh, that's interesting. Look, this hasn't gone up as dramatically as you might expect. Why is that? Well, that's because we've actually only assigned that font size to the body element, not to the HTML element. So what do we do there? All right, let's come up here to this one, and we will say star HTML body. All right. So that's going to assign these styles here to each of these 3 elements in turn. So those commas are very important. I'll just put in font size 16px, just there. So it's assigning it to everything, not just to the body element. Now let's have a look. All right, good. That looks good. Now let's increase that again to 32px. Let's see what happens. That looks more like it. Now the body text has gone up in size, and so is our heading here. Now, the line spacing is much too great there, and this is, the text overall is too big. So I'm going to drop this back down to 16px here, reload. All right. And you can see that our H2 element is smaller now as well. In fact, it's the same as this. So let's explicitly, actually I'm going to put in a comment here and just call this part of my style sheet. I'm just going to call this typography. And everything typographic I'm going to try to group in this section here. And I will actually make another CSS comment in here. I call this a layout section. So I'm really starting to organize my stuff here a little bit. I might even put that navigation class up here. Just starting to organize it. We can organize things a little bit more as we go on, but that's a pretty good start. Okay, let's redefine the H2 style. So let's give that again, similar to the H1. Just going to actually just copy and paste that. I'll just make that 2 rem for now. Let's have a look at that. All right, that's a bit better. Okay, lots of other refinements we can make. In particular, I probably want to adjust the spacing on that heading here. I think it's much too open up, much too open there. So I can do that by adjusting, say, the padding. I might change the padding, which has a certain default value. I might change that to 0. Don't do anything. Let's change that to the margin to 0. That looks more like it. Okay. Let's just sort of closes that up a little bit. All right, so that's a little bit of on how we can import typefaces using Typekit. There are other ways of doing that. You can actually have your download a font, say, and store it inside your actual web folder itself and load it in here as well, similar way, but this is a nice straightforward way to use Adobe Fonts to get you started.